Right. The last item on this agenda is the Tuam Street at Justice Precinct entrance. And I will invite the chair of the ITI committee to introduce this report.
Thank you. Well, as you know, this came to the ITI committee on the 13th of March, and we had robust discussion, and I know it's a tricky one. I think even the staff had difficulty coming to a recommendation on it, and of course the vote was tied at 4-4. Now, because this was a safety issue, I was keen to bring it straight here because we didn't have the details of the incidents that had occurred at the time of our meeting. And so I thought it was prudent to bring it straight here, and by this time we have now received some edited information, which I thank staff for bringing that through so quickly. But in the original staff report that came to us on the 13th of March, there was an option of a detector-activated warning signs, or 2 of them, to be installed. But due to funding, absence of funding should I say, this was not recommended. But yesterday at the ITI committee we had a Cycles Facilities Program update, and in there we identified a $30,000 funding which staff have agreed could be used from this budget to fund the detector activated warning signs. If you refer to the attached memo from Michael on page 14, that has the details of these warning signs. So we have crafted a new resolution which recommends that we choose this as an option to address the safety issue, and also adds some warning writing on the roadway itself, on the approaching lane from which the vehicles will be turning left, and also on the cycleway lane as well as an added precaution. So the committee members who voted against installing a giveaway sign on the cycleway were really opposed to changing the priority here and ultimately giving a right of way to a heavier, faster vehicle. And to me, I didn't think that was a safe option at all. So I'm quite pleased to see this possibility, on the table today, and I do hope that we can look at this favourably. So
you'd like to move?
I'm happy to move
the amendment in your name. All right. Are there any questions, or did you want a question? You're going to second it. Sorry, speak up. Thank you. Question, right?
Look, thanks for. I'm glad it has come a second time and now to council, but just I'm still not entirely clear about the accident record. And for example, in the report, there's been 2 accidents, but the seriousness of those and the impact of those.
Yes, I can answer that. Yes, we have 1 reported accident. The reports come when someone is prepared to make a formal complaint to the police, which then gets lodged as on the crash database. That listed for that 1 reported accident 1 minor injury to the cyclist who was sideswiped by the vehicle turning in. Since that time, I've met just in recent weeks with the manager of the Justice Precinct, and she advises that the exact same circumstances happen again, where a cyclist was sideswiped by a left-turning vehicle coming into the Justice Precinct. She didn't get into details of whether there was any injury, but they talked to the cyclist and advised that they could make a complaint, so therefore it's lodged as an accident, and they refused to do so and then went on their way. So we can only assume that there was no significant injury involved.
Thanks, Mike. And the period of time now since the major cycleway was installed and till now with those 2 accidents, what period of time, can you just remind me how long the cycleway's been in?
Right, yes, I've got that in my original report here. Sorry, I'll just have to, it was in December 2014 that we brought this report on the Tuam Street reconstruction to council. The works were completed in 2015. Now, I'm sorry, I haven't got the exact date. So, you know, we're looking at approximately 4 years for these two reported, two known accidents. The acting road police manager did advise that they have observed lots of near misses. So, you know, it can be a matter of luck whether a near miss manifests into an actual collision or not.
Another question, just because it wasn't clear, although it might be in the report too, but on the diagram with Tuam Street on page 12, Mike. So the parts like as in blocks. My recollection of seeing when I've been and seen that, is that like a raised kind of like, well, not barrier, but it's a raised little platform.
Separation.
It's a separation construction, or constructed as a separation.
The piece between the road and the cycleway, is that what you were asking? Yes, that's raised.
Between the cycleway and the next lane.
Yes,
yes,
it's raised.
There is.
So,
thanks.
Obviously, you know, turning left over a cycleway is no different from turning left through an intersection, crossing a pedestrian crossing. You know, that goes with traffic lights. You know, and they're always dangerous places. So, but I keep looking at the photographs, and I ask myself, if you, because these aren't just cars, are they? They're paddy wagons that go through there as well. So when you're stopped at that give way sign, because literally, you know, in a way, give way, you have to stop unless you can see that the way is clear. Can you see in your rear vision mirror? Is this? I mean, can you actually see that there's a cyclist coming?
Well, we have been advised by the personnel who work at the Justice Precinct that is a very difficult thing to be able to pick up the whole picture within your rear vision mirror. It's
sorry, the side mirror. I meant, you know, because it's the
side mirror to the vehicle. Yeah. Well, they claim that, yes, that doesn't always pick up the whole view for them.
So the flashing lights probably will really help in terms of actually saying there is something coming.
Yes, absolutely, because if they pull up to that limit line, they'll be looking directly, would have the flashing light, the sign positioned in such where they can look at it, and it'll either be going or not. If it's going, they then can wait there until that sign goes off, and the sign would go off once the cyclist has cleared the conflict area. And we'd also be able to set it up that if we had cyclists coming at close headway or gaps, that we would make sure that continued going, so you didn't have a difficult situation where the sign goes off, they think, oh, we'll take off now, and then they get hit by the close following next cyclist. So we can install a system that will cope with that situation.
I tend to have a view in my mind that cyclists travel quite fast in those cycle lanes, and a number do. Not everyone does. Some people, you know, sort of kind of elegantly, you know, cycle through. Most people through, and it doesn't feel like it's commensurate with the car travelling at 30k. That there isn't a commensurate reduction in the speed of cycles. So cycles can be up to 30k themselves. Yes. And I just wonder whether wouldn't it? I mean, this is where I'd got to the other day. Wouldn't it be better that we actually required the cyclist to slow down and actually look to see that the way was clear? I mean, I do worry about who's in the paddy wagon, for example, and what other distractions there might be at that time. And if it's a flashing light and the cyclist is asked to slow down as well, does that then, is it a double barrier to the kind of risks that we see at the moment?
Well, all I can say is my original report put to ITI was to look at changing the give way, so the cyclist virtually had to stop and give way to a vehicle, and the reason for that was because at that time we didn't have a capital works budget to look at anything else. That was something we could do immediately to immediately respond to a safety concern. So there's, and I can completely understand that concept is not accepted.
Well, no, some of us thought that was probably the most cost-effective way of getting the outcome. But are you saying that wouldn't have been your preferred recommendation if you had had access to the budget that has now been found?
Well, I could say that now that it wouldn't be my preferred option because backlash of colleagues and, right through the council at every level, there has been very strong opposition to the thought of downgrading the level of service for a cyclist by putting them on a give way at this point.
I don't think that. I mean, I would feel terrible that a staff member would feel any sense of backlash from anyone sitting around this table. You are there to advise us and to provide us with your expert advice based on your knowledge and experience. We don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with us. I
apologise, I wasn't meaning people around this table. It's certainly
no, but yes and no. I understand that there was a split at the staff level as well. So I'm actually trying to be helpful. It is a tricky one to work through. This option wasn't on the table the other day. I'm interested in it, and it's one that we haven't had a lot of consideration about. But leaving aside backlash and bikelash and the whole 9 yards, leaving aside all of that, in terms of the most cost-effective mechanism for providing a safety control in this environment here, don't forget about the rest of the network, just this environment here, what would your advice be?
Well, to be cost effective would be to put a giveaway on the cyclists.
Right.
My prime objective here was safety of the cyclists. That's the main objective. I mean, in traffic engineering, we're talking about safety and convenience. If you've got to compromise one, you compromise convenience over, rather than safety.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah. Aaron.
Thank you. So at the meeting the other day, we discussed some potential unintended consequences if we get cyclists to give way mid-block. And so while that might work at this particular one of the unintended consequences could be that drivers get used to not looking for cyclists when they're crossing cycle lanes, for example, those drivers that are going into the Justice Precinct. And so it might be at other access ways that cyclists get knocked off, not at this particular one. And the other one was that, so on St Asaph Street, for example, where we have the same layout but in the other direction, there are a huge number of access ways. And I've been sideswiped by a truck going in, didn't look in its wing mirrors, going in to next to one of the restaurants down there, huge number. So do you think that we would start doing more giveaway signs for every driveway down St Asaph Street that's really busy? Should we do this as well?
All I can respond to that on is that, yes, there has been a degree of debate on whether this is a unique situation or not. I can only just talk about the response I get from the management of the Justice Precinct. They consider it quite unique in the fact of the situation that many of their staff are in at the point of turning and having to look 180 degrees behind them, which is slightly different from many other entrances where they are turning in from the wider median.
Yeah. And would the cyclists have to be looking 180 degrees behind them too?
Well, yes, probably, but that as a cyclist myself, that's a lot easier to do than in a vehicle, particularly.
And if we took out the words cost effective, so part of the driver has been for a cost effective one. If cost effective didn't necessarily just mean cheapest, would this potentially be the safest option, given that there is now budget available? It's not a huge amount of budget for something that is, as you said, potentially a unique case. And also in the original report, it did mention that the Justice Precinct would be talked to about helping to fund it.
Can I just quickly say, would it be the safest option? The difficulty I have, and I experience this every day when I walk along Antigua Street, many cyclists, and I'm not saying all cyclists, do not obey all laws. The difference here is that if we were looking at pitching what the cyclists will do compared to the staff member of the precinct, we've got a captive audience with a known number of people going into the Justice Precinct. So it would be a lot easier to advise them on how they should behave and what controls are on them when they're going in, rather than the whole population of cyclists, which some are great cyclists and some are not so great. So in terms of safety, I would probably err towards, if we had to make a call, saying that if we had a flashing light so that every known person who goes into that precinct is advised on what that light means and what they should do, that's probably going to be safer than just relying on the giveaway for every single cyclist that possibly could go through there.
It's very helpful. Aaron?
So 2 questions then. So the first one would be around the cycle lane being next to the emergency precinct. Which was designed first, and would one have gone in with, I mean, would they have done the design of the emergency precinct like that if they knew there was going to be that cycle lane placed there? Or would they have gone for a different entry-exit point?
By the time they were in build,
I think the cycle lane came first, but we engaged heavily with the people who were working on the J&E.
Yeah.
So they were well aware of what was happening.
The cycle lane, because the cycle lane was mid-block through the lanes originally.
Yeah, no, that's
yes.
History.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then on underpassing on a vehicle, because so a cyclist is underpassing a vehicle. So if you've put a cycle lane on the left-hand side of the road, that means that you anyone turning into any driveway, you're being underpassed by the vehicle. Because no, they're not coming, so they all stop.
No, they're in separate lanes, so it's the same as a car trying to turn right from the right lane with the car in the left-hand lane. So basically, anybody that's any driver that's entering or exiting a driveway has to give way to anyone on a cycle lane or a footpath. That's
inside the limits.
Yes, that's inside.
Yeah, that's coming through. If pedestrians are quite easy because they move quite slow and you can see them.
If there was no marked cycle lane or separated lane, and the cyclist was just coming up the left-hand side of a vehicle in the same lane, then yes, there may be that.
But so my point is that on a road, if the lane is on the right-hand side, because drivers are on the right-hand side, the blind spot on a vehicle is always the back left. It's not, if you're going to have a cycle lane and you're going to turn into a driveway on that side, as a driver you can see the cyclist quite easy because they're right there. The blind spot's always there, but that's where we've put this there and St Asaph Street. The cycle lane's on the side where the blind spot is. Right, okay. Was that not considered?
So there's quite a bit of consideration.
You should have been here for the debate on whether it should be on the right-hand side or the left-hand side with the bus exchange. I mean, it's just exactly the same issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then...
No, it should be in the south frame, is where it should be.
My other question, and I think I know the answer, but not everyone's on the committee, the police's position and corrections position on the design. Do they want the cyclists to give way, or do they want the turning vehicles with the blind spots to give way?
Their position is that they want this to be a safe situation where it's clear, there's clarity about who gives way to who, and they're supportive of the flashing light, because then that gives them clarity that there is actually a cyclist approaching. So that resolves, in my mind, the flashing light resolves the two issues. One, it gets over the fact that we'll be delaying the cyclists by a give way. The second is that we're giving good advice, clear advice to the motorists turning in, and for them being delayed, many of them are delayed anyway because quite a few of them have to get security clearance to enter the precinct, particularly if they have certain people in the vehicles.
So the police's position is that with the flashing light, they're okay for the cyclists to keep going, they'll give way?
Yes.
Right, because that wasn't the deputation, because the flashing light didn't exist.
But we didn't have the
I think what's
option
happened
at
is
stage.
that since Tuesday, people have done a considerable amount of work to see whether the budget could be found to come up with an alternative solution. And I guess when I asked you the question about cost effective, and I said the most cost effective, I didn't mean the cheapest, I meant the most effective for the cost. And I think I'm hearing from you that the lights are actually that, not the give way sign, because the give way sign in itself won't solve the problem. Yeah. Pauline.
Is there any chance these incidents could be driver error?
Well, it certainly is driver error if the driver fails to see the approaching cyclist, but it's a matter of what's practical or reasonable, and I think that's been highlighted already, that it is an extremely difficult situation for these particular people if they are in a stressed environment inside the vehicle, combined with having to look directly behind them.
It's a wonder they don't hit every cyclist. Just in your report too, you in 5.5 of the original report, you've recognised that cyclists focus on the lane rather than signs. So that's correct? Yes,
I can say that I've carried out some surveys of the site and watching where the cyclists are looking, and cyclists are looking straight ahead or down.
Yeah, so
very few are looking up.
So what I'm wondering is, in the new resolution where we've got signage on the cycleway, that's what the cyclists will see, and just supporting the Mayor's comments. So we're writing on the road itself, on the lane, and would we recommend cyclists slow down? Is what I'd like it to say. Slow down, beware turning vehicles.
So left that a little bit open, and I guess the second one in the amended resolutions there around it proves the improvement of the existing signage, and so part of that will be making sure that's in the right vision space, and also we can add stuff on in terms of on the pavement as well if we need to.
But I think we should say, you often see it for cars, slow, children or something like that, slow crossing vehicles. And I think that a warning for cyclists to slow down would be very pertinent in this situation. So, I mean, I'll give that to staff to take away, but I think you've heard that from the Mayor as well, that there is, and I agree, there are cases for cyclists to simply slow down in the central city. Totally agree with that. So that's possible?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Look, as someone who's driven anything from a van to a B train on occasion, I know it's, and I take Aaron's point, the left-hand side of the vehicle, particularly if it's a decent-sized vehicle, is your blind spot, and quite often your mirrors are at a height that you don't actually see. You might see the back of the vehicle, but you may not see halfway up it. So I'm just interested in your opinion of whether it is better to protect the cyclist with more signage and making them safer with vehicles that potentially can't see them is a better option rather than the flashing light system, which still gives the cyclist the the right of way, and still, in my mind, still makes them susceptible to being in the path of some heavy bit of metal that they're going to come off second best with. So do you think the give way sign, given the sort of height of mirrors, is still possibly a better option than that's going to give absolute protection to cyclists, or are we deferring to this notion that we're trying to slow cycling traffic down?
I think what we're trying to achieve with the activated lights flashing lights, is that we're raising awareness on both parties. So that through the improved signage, we're raising the awareness for the cyclists, and also through the flashing lights, it raises the awareness for the drivers as well. So it's sort of a better outcome.
Just hold up sort of like the Google Earth view, the street view, and just seems to me like one of the cost-effective, efficient use of resources would be maybe just to put some markings across the cycle lane and across the entranceway. So, sorry, where?
2.
Yeah, approves the improvement of the existing advanced signage.
Sorry, I'm not talking about like up signage. I'm talking about just either some paving on the road. So you've got a continuous green lane going through. Are you talking about changing that?
Oh, we can look at the markings on the pavement as well as part of number 2.
Right. Yeah. I just wondered in terms of just some hatching or some. I think having the green lane go straight through kind of encourages people to keep
green,
moving.
I think that needs to move. You know, the green painting there.
Yep, that's what we'll look at as part of 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Yanni's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So we have a motion that has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate? Phil and Aaron?
Well, I'm quite glad very glad really, we've received this extra information. I was one at the committee who actually didn't vote I voted for the staff recommendations, and I guess things are now clearer, and especially because we have got the additional facility of the flashing lights, warning lights, and it goes. At the time, it seemed to me that it was the main option we were given with the give way was that was the safest way for cyclists. But I certainly recalled Don Babe from Spokes, his very strong submission, which was really about, we're dealing with a major cycleway here, and if we were to start making changes, potentially other changes would follow, at other driveways. And it seems to me now, with the accident record over 3 years, that it's probably no greater than probably many other turning points for cyclists. And we've all cyclists have experienced that. Doesn't mean it's good. And so I would understand that staff will be monitoring any future accidents along here, and that will be helpful. So basically, at the time too, I think because it's unique in the sense that the police come in with the paddy wagon, and that can be challenging. At the same time, hopefully there is a slip lane here. There's room for them to wait. Also, though, clearly the flashing lights will assist everybody. So I'm actually very happy to have changed my mind about this important issue. It's important we get it right. But I certainly think that now we're still on track to keep our cycleways going, and there is absolutely sufficient safety for the cyclist and the motorist.
Aaron?
Yeah. I was the same as Phil at the committee. I supported the staff recommendation. I went along with the police's position on this one, on that particular intersection. And the counter debate to that was that cyclists had rights too, and that there's a major cycleway there and you don't want to disrupt their journey. I'm of the position that as a cyclist, and I cycle around the city, I I like the cycleways. I think they're pretty good to cycle in. I also believe in self-preservation. So I might be in a cycle lane, but I still know that things can go wrong. I know that at any intersection that you can get a vehicle turning left, that a lot of them cannot see you. And this is particularly one of them. I'm more than happy that the council would give ways on a cycle lane if it was deemed necessary, given where that lane was covering. And the two spots I would point out in the city is this entrance exit of the emergencies precinct, and the other one would be the hospital. The fact that an ambulance taking someone in the golden hour to hospital would give way to cyclists, to me would seem insanity. The same with running family members in and out of a hospital situation, people under stress, they're not going to make good decisions. That around a hospital a cyclist would give way, and the same around this emergency precinct. There's a couple of vehicles that go in out of there that have major blind spots. One is the large crimes truck that goes in and out of there that has a blind spot for turning in and out. The people that are operating that have come from major crimes like the 15th of March, like Exeter Street, where they have seen and been through things that you do not want to mention at this table. We don't need details, we know what those crimes are, and so their headspace can be in a different spot to others. They do train for this, don't get me wrong, but major crimes works in very, very stressful situations. The other one is when you're coming in here with a paddy wagon and you've got someone in the back and they've got a spit hood on and they're kicking your seat as you're driving because they don't want to go to jail, and they may have defecated in the back seat. There's all sorts of things going on in that car, and you're stopping to give way while your seat's being kicked. I don't know if that's the safest situation for the cyclists. For the sake of two intersections in the entire city that might have a giveaway for cyclists, I think that's the safest way to go, and I believe the majority of public would agree with me. And if you want to create more bike-lash, do things like say that the police give way to cyclists and ambulance give way to cyclists. I don't believe that's right. I believe it's the other way around, and there's also prison vans that come in and out of there that are often the subject of protest.
Thank you. Just to address one quick thing from Councillor Kearns is that this isn't an intersection, it's a driveway, and which makes it quite different, and it's mid-block away from any normal intersections. But at a really high level, let's think about our vulnerable road users. So let's think about our disabled, our pedestrians, our cyclists, those who want to get about the city but aren't doing so in a heavy vehicle of any type. We can keep all of them safe by saying, let's not use our public space. We can say to our disabled, hey, listen, we want to keep you safe, so actually we're not going to allow you access to this area. We can say to pedestrians, let's take away your pedestrian crossing because cars don't stop very often, and let's lower your level of service. We can say to cyclists, hey, cars are really dangerous, so actually we're going to make you give way to them at every driveway. But that doesn't encourage a people-friendly city. If we're putting the road hierarchy as it should be, with our most vulnerable at the top, then we need to insist on better behaviour from those who sit below them on the hierarchy. So cyclists need to give away to pedestrians, cars need to give away to both, and at a high level, changing this around at a driveway sets a dangerous precedent. Thanks.
Sorry, Pauline, you're the last one. Yanni.
This is why I think it's so important to review things like the Central City Plan, the Blueprint, and the Accessible City. You can clearly see that part of the problem we're struggling with as a council is these things that get designated without any proper transport or traffic planning, and wait for the convention centre and let's look at what mess that's going to create, where it's going, with all the heavy vehicles and the cyclists and the pedestrians and the trams. So I think really, you know, we're coming up with a solution that is suboptimal. We're seeing accidents be created, which a number of us warned when we put in the cycle lane on Tuam Street. The reality was that the safest place for cyclists and pedestrians should have been the South Frame, a beautiful green corridor connecting the Polytech to Hagley Park, and that's a real lost opportunity. which is really, really unfortunate. So now we're trying to do a little bit of everything in the same road corridor and getting suboptimal outcomes, which I think is incredibly disappointing for the city. So it's a shame that we're having to have this debate, but you know, I think the solution that's come up with is probably the best of a bad situation, and we just need to get on and get this done. But hopefully in the lessons learned, someone can review the blueprint and the accessible city plan and the use of designations without proper transport planning to really think about what the impact has been on us as a city, because I think we're worse off for it.
Dion?
No, I'd actually just say you're right with the missed opportunity, and it's a shame that 8 years past we still don't have a full lane through the south frame, which is a shame. I think, you know, get people kicked up. But I'm actually I'll vote against the amendment. I would have supported the staff recommendation. I think, you know, what was said was correct, and this is not just a driveway. This is, you know, probably one of the most important bits of that central city with the, you know, the extremely different circumstances to a driveway. So I'd be supporting the staff recommendation, but not the amendment for that reason.
Okay. Pauline?
Yeah, look, I disagree that this is a suboptimal solution. This is a really good solution, and the cycleway on Tuam Street is working very well. There's no reason that this should be a dangerous driveway. The vehicles have to mostly pause and often stop to wait for the gate. And I think what's actually emerged from this is an issue with the vehicles. Look, we're in an age of technology. Why aren't they using a dash cam or better mirrors? And I think this is an issue that needs to really be looked at, because I don't know how they manage to do any left turns around the city at all if they've got all this issue with people defecating in the back and kicking the back seat and all sorts of things. The other thing I can't understand is it's a one-way street. A vehicle is travelling on the left-hand side, parallel and adjacent to the cyclists. They must see the cyclists going along with them. I can't for the life of me understand any of this. I'm really pleased that we have found, the staff have managed to find a budget to put in these lights. I think they're actually called flashing studs, aren't they? I don't know, I like that one. You know, and I really would like to see some attention given to safety features in trucks and heavy vehicles. We have had fatalities around the city from trucks who haven't seen cyclists, even pedestrians on their left, and I think it's time that this was looked at as well. We've got technology, we can do it. So I'm really happy to support this today, and I hope the rest of the councillors do. It retains the cyclist priority on our major cycleway. I think it's really important, but at the same time it ensures safety, and I do support the writing on the pavement on the cycle lane and also on the roadway for the vehicles as an addition, rather than putting signs up high everywhere. We ensure that the cyclists will see that. So yeah, happy to support.
Right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. Can you put up your hands for no? Manji, East, Swigs, Kewen and Scandrett. That guy. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know that staff found that all really difficult. Just want to acknowledge that. These things are never easy, and we really appreciate all the effort that you went to help us find a solution. So